Hello everyone, welcome on a new episode of Robert Spotlight.
Doing all this moderation stuff for Discord.
I'm a social media futurist.
Been a moderator at Be Friends.
Now it's my project because I love sports.
I'm speaking at NFT NYC.
Welcome on the show. Welcome everyone and welcome on a new episode of Robert Spotlight. Robert Spotlight, Harvey, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you to be here. And sorry for the little delay. Harvey, could you introduce yourself for people that don't know you?
Sure. So I'm a long-form generative artist. I've had 2 drops on Art Bocks this year. The last drop was a curated drop called Fontana. So prior to that, I've been making generative art for 10 years. And prior to that, I've been making digital art for 15 years. So, 25 years in total. So that's just my general art background. I run a small company with my wife. We make, it's called Moonleap. We make meditation cushions. So I've not been what you might call a professional artist in the sense I've earned an income from my work up until my involvement with Art Bocks. But I've been pretty dedicated over the years. I've made a lot of work. And every spare minute I've made art. So that's about it, I guess.
Okay, perfect. Makes sense. Thank you for the introduction. So you basically you are involved on a genre art since more than 20 years.
Right. So I've actually been making generative art, so art from code, for about 10 years, but I've been making digital art and something that's very similar to generative art for 25 years. So for that first 15 years, I kind of evolved this very sort of constrained geometric way of working. And I did have a little code in there, and it was very close, I would say, to generative art. But then 10 years ago, I started to develop some visualization tools to explore some sort of geometric objects I was interested in, but not really thinking. I wasn't really aware of generative art as such. So, and the outputs from these tools, I was really, I thought, wow, these are really nice. And I just explored that kind of, that approach. And then, slowly that did morph into something that would be more recognizable as generative art.
Okay, make a perfect sense. How do you start playing with coding? When did you start playing with coding?
So, probably about 20 years ago, I just started off, I have no formal training, but I started sort of like building websites for my own artwork. And then that kind of morphed into more ambitious projects. I've done a lot of work over the years with SVG, scalable vector graphics, and resources for other artists and designers. There's like pattern resources, design tools, and so forth. So they were just like private projects that, they're still online. They still bring in a small income and so forth. But that's where I learned to code, really, just sort of developing my own little small projects. And I did work professionally as a web developer for some time, probably 5 years or so.
Okay.
But I don't do that anymore.
Okay, perfect. And so, how did you discover Art Bocks?
So yeah, I was aware of the NFT scene, I think, pretty early, just because I have an interest in technology. I listen to a lot of technology podcasts and so forth. So, but I hadn't really seen a way to sort of like fit what I wanted to make into the NFT world. But then I heard a podcast with Snowfro, the founder of Art Bocks, and I think it was probably about a year ago, this time last year, and instantly I thought, wow, I've got to put together a submission because this sounds perfect. And he was articulating a sort of like a way of making generative art, a kind of protocol, the whole minting process. And I felt like I'd been trying to imagine this for some time. It was like, it just felt, that's the solution I've been looking for. So I put together a submission that week, and I pretty much dropped everything and just focused on that. And fortunately, I got accepted, and here we are today. And I intend to continue to work with Art Bocks as long as I can.
Yes, makes sense. So basically, you listened to a podcast with Snowfall, and it was a eureka moment for you. It's when you understood how you can use your code skills with art.
Yeah, so it was kind of like, I knew I could use code to make art, and I've been doing it for a long time, but it was like, oh wow, there's a way to realize this, and there's a market for it, and there's people who are paying good money for it. And that was just that kind of moment of realize, having all the pieces click into place, and a community, a big community of people who were fascinated with the sort of things that I was fascinated with. And yet, for a long time, I didn't talk to anybody about what I did. None of my friends were particularly interested. And my wife wasn't. She is now, but she wasn't then. So, it was kind of like, there's a lot of pieces to long form generative art. There's the community, there's the whole minting process. These are all quite different things what you find in traditional art. There is no, I can't think of an equivalent. So it was kind of like just understanding how those pieces all fit together, and come to the realization that this is a home for what I want to make. It felt like a home finally for something I've been doing for a long time.
Perfect, makes sense. I'm going to display Fontana, which is, if I get it right, your first project on Art Bocks.
Second.
Okay.
So Photon's Dream was the first one. Fontana was the first curated drop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's Fontana, it's the second one.
Yeah, if you scroll back up and click on all items, just above the image, you'll see, yes, that's the one. Yeah. So these are the mints. Then there's 500. Of course, the algorithm can produce, an infinite number of mints.
Yes. Could you talk a little bit about your process of how you approach the coding aspect?
Yeah, sure. It's not like, I think some people think that maybe, you just have an artistic idea, an artistic vision, and then you just code that up as if the two processes are separate. But for me, at least certainly with this project, and now, the current projects I'm working on, the forms and everything comes out of the code. It's like you can't separate the medium from the actual art. So of course I start with a rough idea visually what I'm aiming for, but in that process of, building functions and like just working out things like equations and so forth, that process kind of like feeds back. It's like a feedback loop, and you get ideas from the actual manipulation of code. So I would say that, something like Fontana, certainly I could not have imagined art like this before I started to use code. It was, I don't think, if I kind of designed the project to kind of look, you can't really tell from these little thumbnails, but if you click on one, you'll see that they kind of look like they're been hand drawn. Well, at least that was what I was like technical drawing. If you click on the, it's still quite small on the screen. If you click, there's 4 little icons on the bottom. Yeah, if you click on the second one, yeah, it'd probably take a little while to load. So so I try to make it look kind of like it was hand drawn, like in a sense of technical drawing. But I don't think, if I 10 years ago, before I started the code and stuff, if I sat down with a drawing board and drew this out, I would never have arrived at anything like this. I feel like the form comes from the medium. And it's true for, all generative art, So I guess that's just like an overview of the process. So I guess another thing with my work, I'm obsessed with geometry. I have been, since I was a kid. And there's certain kind of like, there's an underlying kind of geometric structure to everything I do. And sometimes that's like, I guess that's always like the starting point for me when I'm starting a new piece, is just thinking about that kind of basic structure, the relationship of all the elements in the piece in a geometric sense. So what else could I say? So do you want me to just talk about the origin of Fontana, or just the work?
Oh yeah, yes. Basically everything that you are comfortable
Right.
to talk with, I'm interested on it.
Okay, right. So Fontana, this project, I was when I first produced some sort of crude outputs using the sort of geometry I wanted to explore, I thought, oh wow, that looks like, they look like fountains. They had this kind of, they looked like they were coming from a single source. And so, and Fontana is Latin for fountain. So, and then I kind of, I started to think about this idea of, fountain is this source of moving water, right? It's this thing that, and yet, to try, I've always been interested in trying to, like visually represent things that are moving, things that are always changing. And so I had this idea that maybe this project could represent a flowing fountain, but like I was kind of intrigued by the idea you could represent it in very geometric and very static, in a very static way, hence the sort of mechanical drawing component, which is by itself a very slow, laborious process. So you had this tension between this movement, the flow of water, this ever-changing, subject, and this very mechanical, slow process of rendering it, which of course is kind of impossible. But when you try to sort of like do something impossible like that, it sometimes leads to kind of like solutions you wouldn't normally think of. So I was thinking of things like Leonardo da Vinci's drawings of water, and then I was also thinking of, there was an artistic movement in the last century called Futurism, where those artists were, they were trying to express the new machine age, where everything was moving fast. They had fast moving transportation, and this is kind of like 1920s, 1930s. I might be wrong on that date, but it's in that sort of period. And so I saw like there was a connection to this piece with that, and I think a parallel to where we are now with generative art. I think this is a very distinctive movement in art. And it's kind of expressing this kind of new decentralized world. It's radically different maybe from what we've seen before. So there was this parallel, and I kind of referenced that in the write-up to the project. But that then fed into the kind of color expression I aimed for in the project. And that was another unique part of the project. Actually, a lot of generative art, and I don't know how much your audience kind of knows it, but actually maybe you can tell me. So your audience, do they know much about generative art, or are they more sort of just into the general NFT space or crypto world?
Not particularly with gen art.
Okay.
I would say that you can talk as a newbie.
Okay, so yeah, maybe I'm going too fast here, but okay, so okay, so yeah, so one of the more sort of experimental things I've done with this project was to select or produce the colors from the algorithm. So many projects before this, actually the artist would pick colors, you know, just in the normal way you might use a color picker, and then embed those color values in palettes in the actual code. And that's become a fairly standard way of doing it. Now, I wanted every output to have a different color expression, to be completely different. So I created this algorithm that selects colors, you know, and actually every single element in the work, each work has a slightly different color. So there'll be 10,000 color values in any one output or so, and each one will be different, but but collectively they're trying to sort of like aim for a particular color expression, and that color expression in this project was kind of like this. I wanted it to kind of look like it came from maybe the 1920s, 1930s, from that period when futurism was around. So that's that.
Okay. And during your process of I assume that you create a first version of the code, you launch to watch the variation of the output, and you make maybe several edition of the code. When have you been comfortable with this version of the code?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, it's the same old problem for every artist, right? When are you finished? I think that's what you're asking, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's always that's one of the challenges. Right? So for me, it's like when with Fontana especially, I want to, when the whole set makes sense. So, there's some very simple outputs in Fontana, some very complex outputs, and you want to get to a point where, like, when you look at the set as a whole, it makes sense. The distribution, the complexity, and everything makes sense. And also, like, it's not enough just to have a simple output and a complex. The simple outputs have to have something to say. They have to have their own personality. They can't just be simple, just to make variation. So it's not just a question of kind of reducing complexity. You want a little bit of poetry in the simple ones, and also all levels. So it's like when you get to a point when the project really seems like it has its own story. That every output has, it certainly has achieved a certain level of quality, and that's the big challenge in this particular art genre, long form generative art, because you don't get to cherry pick the outputs. I think maybe some of your audience won't understand that. So you create the algorithm and they're minted, but nobody, you just take the first 500. Nobody sort of like curates those outputs. Nobody cherry picks them. So obviously so there's a lot more required of the algorithm. You can't prior to Art Blocks, I would make generative art, and then I'd just go through like a lot of artists and just hand pick 5-10 outputs I really liked, and then I might tweak them in Photoshop and so forth. With this, you can't do that. Every output has to be, of a certain quality, but also has to be sufficiently different from other outputs. So it's a kind of unique challenge. But yeah.
But how do you master these skills? Because the way that you put it, I want to say that it can be seen as it's easy, but it's not easy. It's complex. It's very hard to find this balance between make every piece with a good quality and to have like a variety on the overall collection. So how do you master these skills?
Well, I mean, I'm not assuming I've mastered anything, but it's just practice, just lots of work. And I actually feel, because I used to be a traditional artist in the sense I used to paint and things like that. So once you get really sort of like familiar with the whole process, the coding, it feels very direct. And actually, to me, it doesn't feel that much different to making a painting, in the sense that you're still trying to solve the fundamental problem of variety within unity. So a painting is kind of, you might work for a month on a painting and you're still trying to, there's a unified, you're using the same artistic language. So you've still got rule set. You've got a rule set there which governs what marks you make. But that rule set is often just embodied in your body. You can't articulate it and you can't express it in code, but there's still a rule set which you're developing in the same way you are in an algorithm, which kind of like constrains the visual language, which makes it look like your style. And then you're trying to kind of elaborate on that and find variety within that visual grammar, let's call it. So it's fundamentally the same problem but there are differences for sure, So with generative art, you can iterate over many, you can come up with an algorithm, in a few days, and you can generate thousands of different variations, whereas, it just takes a lot longer with a painting. and I actually feel like you can explore styles much quicker with this process. My current project, I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun just to look at abstract expressionism and pop art and see if I can just bring them together. And then you can build an algorithm and you can just iterate over possibilities so fast. You can produce 10,000 outputs in a day, whereas a painting that might take you a week just to do one. So there's a difference in speed, but then there's a trade-off there as well, because with a painting you can really perfect it over a week or however long it takes. And you get, you get control over everything. Whether the trade-off is maybe, I wouldn't say quality, because the quality is in the set as a whole, but individual pieces is going to be really hard to produce outputs which are of the same quality as a painting, which you spend a whole week on, or a month or a year. So how do you? Your question was how do you master it? Well, I don't know. It's the same.
But I think you already replied to it. It's like you have to practice.
Yeah, practice. And, I do put a lot of time in. I mean, I work 12. I can do this for easily 12 hours a day because I love it. So I guess that's, you could say, well, that's an important factor, I think. You've got to love what you do. If it feels like a chore, and it's probably going to reflect in the work you do. I think J.S. Sparks said, if I don't love my work, then nobody else is. And, it's kind of like my own feeling. The more you love what you do, the more that's going to come through in the work. So it's not just a question of skill and practice. You've got to, you can't force yourself to love something. If you can't force yourself to be an artist. It's just kind of like something that you really, really want to do. So
makes sense. Makes perfect sense. And out of the 500 edition, do you have kind of one piece that you love the most out of the 500?
No, I do have. I can. I've been through and picked out. 30 pieces. I had an interview yesterday, and that was, they wanted to look at some of my favorites, and they picked out, I think, about 30 or 40 outputs, which I'm really fond of. But yeah, it's with this approach, I very rarely find like just one output that's just. You don't really want something that's going to be
stand out
so much better than everything else, because then you're going to look at it and think, oh my god.
But it's not on this way. It's not on. It's way better than all the other. It's more like on your what resonates the most. You see what I mean? It's not like, oh, this one it's way better than the other.
Oh.
It's more like, oh, when I watch that, oh, this one I love it. You know,
Right.
but it's not with the lens of this one it's way better than the other.
Okay, right. Yeah, there are some which, I mean, I tend to like the really complex ones. I mean, that's just because I got a personal bent for complexity. I I like complex systems and so forth. So, but
Why?
why do I like
Yes.
I like the challenge of trying to like express complex systems in an ordered way. You know, it's kind of like a perverse thing there where I've done a lot of sort of like graphic design of quite complex systems in the past, and I like that challenge of trying to like articulate just communicating complex ideas. I've done a bit of writing recently, and it's a similar kind of feeling. I like the challenge of trying to, talk about, some of the related concepts around generative art. I like that challenge. And maybe it's kind of, I mean, maybe there's a part of me which just wants to be, and this is kind of an admission really, wants to make something that's impressive. I mean, that's my ego, right?
Okay.
I want to impress people. And I don't want to make stuff that just looks like it's easy to do, if I'm honest.
Okay.
But I mean, the primary, I would say the primary drive is just to make good art, and for the art I love, in history often does look like it's been a big undertaking, and it looks like, oh, somebody's really put a lot of work into this. Not necessarily, it looks like it's the product of a long process, and that may not have been happened in that particular painting, but it may have been the process of a lifetime, So
I get it. Perfect. And what was the feedback of the community?
Oh well, so Fontana. So my first project, it didn't go under the radar, but it didn't create the splash that Fontana has, and I've been totally amazed. At least within the Art Blocks community, I don't know. I mean, it has been there are buyers from outside the Art Blocks community who have bought in, but yeah, within the Art Blocks community, I've been really amazed at the reception. It was way beyond anything I would have expected. Now, it was a curated project, which gives it, that's where the main attention is in Art Blocks. Everybody wants to buy into a curated project. It's kind of like, it's got that higher status, and it's given the kind of lift in the sense it's promoted more. But for whatever reason, it did seem to kind of like talk to the buyers. It seemed to have a story they related to, and I did really, between the two projects, when I done my first one, I felt like I don't know if this was very successful, and I really did look at what had worked on Art Blocks in the community, and try to like just take note of that. And that was something I'd never done before as an artist, because I'd worked in isolation, and I didn't really ever have to look at what the audience liked. And to begin with, that felt like a compromise. But now I realize that's just part of being a more mature artist. And it's not a compromise, because you can always be creative within any constraints. So, in a way, it's just part of being sensitive to the people you're making art for. And so I did look hard at what had worked, and I did sort of like shape the project around it. And I'm always now looking, at what is current in the space, what's working, what people are really, what's selling, what's making a lot of money, even things like that, So, but so I did that. I think that kind of research and that introspection did pay off, because it seemed like it caught the imagination of the buyers community. There's a Discord channel called Block Talk, which is kind of like the hub of the Art Bocks community in terms of the collectors, and it's still today, like, it doesn't seem like 5 minutes, 10 minutes goes by without some reference to the project. So I mean, I'm very grateful. If any of those guys are watching,
so Fontana resonate a lot with the community, right?
Yeah.
And what did someone share with you a story that impressed you the most? Like when I collect this piece because of, and the because of, it's like a story. And did there is a story that impressed you the most?
I think not particularly sort of like distinctive story like that. People, so some of the things, like, they like the fact I didn't put what's called a lot of traits, like metrics that sort of like determine what pieces are. I didn't put a lot of sort of like traits which determine the rarity. So, and I've done that to hopefully encourage, let's not say force, but encourage buyers to really look and see what they liked and put value on the things they liked. So, and that was really well received. So that was some of the feedback I got, that people liked that approach. And I wasn't the first artist to do that. I mean, Tyler Hobbs done that. I can't remember the name of his piece, but he didn't put any traits in. And I think there's been a few others on Art Blocks. So that was one feedback. People really responded well to the color approach I took, the color algorithm. I wrote an article on that, on the generative color approach, and people really responded well to that, shared the article a lot and talked about it. And I tried to create a project that had outputs for every kind of taste. So, there's some people who really like the simple outputs. There's some people like the complex ones, I try to make something there's something for everyone, So that was some of the sort of general feedback I think I've picked up on. Like the textures, like I try to create something that's very kind of not organic, but has this kind of warm sort of textural feel to it, with the paper texture and the kind of scratches and so forth. And that was really well received, the kind of layers. So that was some of the general sort of feedback I got, I think.
Okay, perfect. There is a donation part of the collection. So you gave 20%, if I get it right, to a donation. Do you want to share a little bit why you choose that particular donation?
Right. So yeah, it was 25%, and that's not because I'm generous, because it's kind of like it's become. I mean, that's Snowfro, really. We should thank for that, because he's kind of like it's part of the culture of Art Blocks to give this type of donation. So, every artist donates it, and it's just kind of expected. It's not mandatory, but as far as I know, nobody is actually said no, I'm not going to do it.
Yes, so, it's part of the culture.
Yeah, and I mean, it's nice. It feels like the right thing to do, because the money we make from Art Blocks drops is still potentially quite crazy, and it's a lot more than, say, a lot of traditional artists would make, So I think it's the right thing to do. So I chose it's called Water for Sudan, and this charity, they help people of Sudan, dig wells and educate them about kind of like helping them to sort of like set up systems where they can provide clean water for villages, and solar power, and just the basic utilities, amenities that we just take for granted, right?
Yes.
And so hopefully, I think the money that is donated, we're looking at maybe supplying some big tanks for 2 villages, which will supply, I can't remember, it's like a couple of thousand people will have access to clean drinking water, whereas before, those people may have been walking 5 miles to go and get a jug a day, muddy water. So it's nice. It feels good to be able to be part of that. And then once we've finalized what that money's going to be allocated to, then I'll do a little article on that maybe and publish that on Twitter so the buyers can see where some of their money's gone.
Okay. Perfect. Did you want to share anything else regarding Fontana?
Fontana.
Yes.
Just I think maybe just how surreal it feels to me, having worked. I think my story is fairly typical of a lot of generative artists. We've worked for so long, and there's just not been an audience for what we've done. Maybe a little bit, but there's not been a market, and without a market, there's no real serious audience. People have to own things to really develop that deep emotional connection to it. So that just how much has changed my life in terms of like having an audience, having a community of people to talk to about the work, who want to talk about it. It seems crazy that people want to talk about my work.
You are grateful about that, right?
And I love it. I'm very grateful. I hope that I hope I don't get to a point, if I continue to make art and it's well received, that I don't forget that, So I'm going to try to stay as connected to the community of people who buy my work as possible. I mean, it does take, it takes a lot of time, but I do set aside like an hour every morning, and then during the day I try to say a few things, but it can become quite time consuming. So my priority is just to make more art. I think that's the thing, what the buyers want more than anything. They want to see me productive. So, but yeah, I'm very grateful for it, and I feel like it's amazing to be part of a community, who appreciate what I do, and I appreciate what they do. The buyers, I think when I first started getting into the space, I felt a little alienated by the buyers community, because just looking at the way I didn't understand what they were talking about. I didn't understand the markets, and I still, I'm still learning every day about that. But they spoke a different language, and it just felt like a different world. But slowly, I'm becoming accustomed to the culture, and I'm starting to really enjoy it. And at the moment, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good energy. It's not a lot of bad mouthing. It's not trolling. The Art Bocks forums, especially, they're really well moderated. So it's a pretty healthy space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Talking about community, I have a question for you from Janet Forbes. So I hope that I say your name correctly. So she is a designer artist with a basic code knowledge. And the question is, I would love to know how to get started making gen art.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously we have to learn the code. So, I mean, there are some, like, I know there's some good YouTube tutorials. I think Code Trains is a place where a lot of gen artists started. But I mean, you can do quite a lot. A lot of artists use P5.js, and that provides some really powerful tools. You can get some work pretty quickly with that. It's not my preference, but it's a good place to start. But I would say just start doing something really simple, and I think the barrier to a lot of people who want to try a new creative outlet is just like trying to think, well, I need to get to this place, and it just seems overwhelming. So even if it's just like writing a little piece of code and putting a triangle on the square, and then putting it in a loop and getting that to spin around the screen or whatever, just doing something very sort of like every day, just have a very realistic target. And you'd be surprised how quickly the growth is exponential. It's kind of it's a steep learning curve to begin with, but you've got to be patient in that first year or whatever. Just do manageable chunks, small steps. And it's the same with everything, right? Right. with what you're doing here with the Robert Spotlight, it's exponential growth, right? I mean, you're producing a lot of it. I was just looking at how many videos you've got. But if you keep doing the work, eventually you're going to get that exponential growth, and your audience will grow. It's the same thing when you're doing anything creative. I think you just got to start with small steps. And
Perfect.
That's my
so
advice.
I hope thank you for the reply, Harvey. I hope that Janelle, this reply will help you very much. And now let's talk about your work in progress. And if I don't make any mistake, we will talk about Vellum.
Okay. Well, Vellum, I'm developing that, and I don't think. Baby steps, thanks. You're welcome. So, so Vellum is being developed with. I'm talking to Bright Moments. Maybe your audience won't know what Bright Moments is, but they're an outfit they're kind of the intersection of long form generative art and real life exhibitions. So they have exhibitions around the world, New York, Mexico City, and where else? Los Angeles, LA, Japan, Venice, I think, and they had these in real life exhibitions where people mint at the event. So it's a big party, and there's some process where the artwork's revealed, where the minter makes the purchase, I guess on the phone, and then the artwork is revealed in front of everybody who's attending. So it's a real kind of like party atmosphere. So they're trying to bring the long form generative art into the more traditional art world, and so Vellum is being developed for an exhibition in New York City.
With a white moment as well?
Sorry?
With a white moment as well? Or another company?
No, with Bright Moments.
Okay.
Yeah, in early next year. It's probably going to be in Brooklyn, as far as we still haven't found a space yet. But so that's why that project's going to be going there. The mint dynamics will be slightly different, I think, and I'm really sort of like keen to explore. I just don't want it to be a room full of screens. It's not going to be prints. It is going to be screens, but I want to explore this. Vellum is Latin for curtain, so I want to explore, trying to find a way to show screens in the space. I mean, I'm thinking of using a lot of curtains basically, but to make this more of a kind of like an atypical traditional art viewing experience, because the screens are very flat and hard, and I want something to soften that and contrast that. So it's going to be a lot of plant. If the space we're looking at, it's also got a lot of plants in it. So this will be kind of an unusual and like, viewing experience. And hopefully, something that's quite striking and beautiful. Hopefully, we'll see.
Okay, perfect. And what is the date for this exhibition?
Well, it's to be announced because we don't know exactly yet, but it'll be sort of January, February.
Okay.
Yeah.
So beginning of next year.
Yeah.
Perfect. You do love meditation.
Oh, you've done some research. Yeah.
So what can you share about meditation?
Well, I should be, at the moment, my meditation practice is not as strong as it has been in the past, I still meditate, regularly, but when I was younger, that was really, apart from art, that was my main, and raising my family, and taking care of things like that. But that was, I spent a lot of time, every day, many hours a day for many years, every day meditating. And, if I can meditate for half an hour a day, that's pretty good now. So yeah, it was a really big part of my life. I actually went I started in my early 20s, and I started because I felt a little neurotic, if I'm honest. And for me that seemed like a way to try and heal that and get more sane. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's, I don't know if it's good for everyone. It seemed to help me. I do, I do spend sort of 2 hours, 1.5 hours a day, 2 hours a day walking my dog in nature. And that's also kind of like a very meditative process for me. I try not to I do listen to podcasts once in a while, but I also try to, have at least half an hour where I'm just silent and just paying attention to my footsteps and the sounds of nature. There's a good balance for, somebody who's doing something like in front of a computer all day. But even that you can, if you've been doing it a long time, you can. And sometimes I do remember, even when I'm coding, to be kind of just very attentive to what I'm doing, in the sense that I'm aware of the sounds of the keys. My posture is kind of good and relaxed, and I kind of get into a zone, which is, it's the same thing really, sitting formally on a cushion and just being open and aware to whatever is appearing inside and outside of your body. I guess I don't know what to say about it really. The tradition I was interested in was Zen. I've been on a lot of Zen Buddhist retreats and so forth, which can be brutally punishing, but they're very rewarding if you can find the time and energy to do them. You learn a lot about yourself from sitting in silence for many days without moving. It's very challenging, but it's it can be very rewarding. It's not when you get a chance to do something like that, if you can do it and like just forget everything, and just it's wonderful. But so yeah, we have, like I think I mentioned earlier, my wife and I have a company called Moonleap that makes meditation cushions. So, and that cushion, I designed that for myself because I used to do these retreats, and my legs used to fall asleep and my butt used to be really painful. And so I designed this cushion to alleviate those problems, and it worked for me. And then we found actually there was a market for these cushions, and that's been our bread and butter business for the last 10 years. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And do you? So I have two questions about the meditation. So I will assume that the meditation helps you to balance yourself when you, for whatever struggle, and especially with the coding aspect.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps with, for me, I think like inspiration for me comes from both like doing regular work, so working every day, or at least 5 or 6 days a week, so doing regular activity, but it also comes from just the silence of meditation. So if you have those two things together in your life, if you have these periods where you're very silent and you can forget your work, and then you have the activity, for me anyway, the creativity and the flow of making art just happens naturally. I don't really need to go anywhere else to try and find inspiration. It's just like, okay. But I find if I stop having those periods of silence, that's when like more blocks happen. Funny enough, you get these little, sometimes, when I was younger, especially, I would kind of rest. I would think, when I sit down and meditate, I should forget about my artwork, or I should forget about this geometry I'm thinking about. And then later on, I think in life, I started to stop fighting that, and I would allow it to come up in my mind, and I would use it as a way to focus and just hold that kind of geometric object or whatever it was in my mind. And that would be like the same thing as like paying attention to my breathing, and that would stabilize my mind. And then eventually I would often just, it would just disappear by itself. But so it can be all intermingled with the art process. You can actually use it. You know, if your mind is active when you sit down, well, then maybe don't fight it. Just allow it to like become even more focused and become like the object of your meditation, and then things will settle down, and then maybe it will just disappear by itself without forcing anything. But I don't think I answered your question. I can't remember what it was.
No. You replied to it, but it's good. And my second question, it's did in any point did you think about quite kind of a mix between the yoga activities and the Gen art activities?
In terms of like a project?
Like a project or like kind of that can be seen as a retreat for coders. So there will be one part for like code bootcamp, and on the side, half time it's a coding bootcamp, and the other half it's yoga meditation.
Interesting. Yeah, I maybe hopefully one day I might. Yeah, I can certainly see myself getting more interested in doing something like that. I did for a long time want to kind of like run some workshops where people just came together and they painted, but they didn't paint with the object of making art. They just came with the object of just like many people, it's just sort of like finding that spontaneity, that kind of creative flow. So you're just making marks without any object, without any sort of intention. And and without anybody kind of judging it, whether it's a good or a bad painting, so it's more of a retreat where you're exploring creativity, and you could do that with code. I would certainly be interested in maybe exploring that. I mean, I'm pretty busy at the moment just because I've got this momentum with these drops I've had and stuff. Yeah. But I can see myself doing that one day. Maybe we have these properties where I live now. I mean, one of them, we got 3 houses together, and one of them I often thought it'd be nice to have, maybe converted into some sort of big space where we could do little retreats, or other people could come and do retreats. But yeah, it would be fascinating to explore that, a generative art meditation retreat. Who knows? It could work. It could work. It could be a lot of fun.
Could be.
Or, I think maybe just more of a creativity stroke meditation retreat might be realistic. But you could use generative art as a way to explore that. You could use anything, you could use flower arranging or whatever. But in terms of a project, there's also something I do want to explore. Like there was a guy called an artist called Aaron Penny.
Oh, yes.
So he done a drop with Bright Moments where they had this his work was kind of like waveforms, kind of similar to Photon's Dream, my first project. And, they had this meditative experience where, people would go into rooms and they'd have these kind of little meditation. And then as you minted the mint, it revealed itself and you're in this kind of lazy boy chair in this very calm environment. And it was more supposed to be kind of engender this kind of like meditation. And so, yeah, I would like with the waveform type work I've done, I would like when that's animated, it can be very sort of hypnotic. And I would like to explore that at some point, maybe with someone like Bright Moments, or maybe just doing something solo myself. But, really sort of trying to create a space where people felt safe, where they felt relaxed. And it wouldn't maybe be a big party so much, but it would be more of a process of kind of like this kind of unveiling of something that was really maybe even responded to biometric data, so it could be used in a way that was kind of like therapeutic. It would give you feedback on your inner state, and you could use that to maybe bring your own, you calm your own mind. I know there's a lot of sort of meditation apps which do a similar thing, but it could be a piece of art.
Perfect. Did there is so did you have like 5 more minutes because we are over time? Sorry. Yes. Okay. Perfect. So from question, it's around. Did there is anything on the Gen art world that catch your attention recently?
Sorry, I didn't catch any of that.
No, sorry. So my question is on the gen art world. Did recently something catch your eyes?
On the gen art wall or
Yes.
are there any other artists I like?
Yes, it's maybe art or like on a coding perspective. Did there is something that you find, oh, that it's interesting?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So there are some, there's definitely some artists I really respect and find an inspiration. Emily Z is, I just met her the other week at Martha, the Art Bocks gathering at Martha. Yeah, is a big inspiration to me. There are a whole bunch. I mean, I don't actually want to name too many, I guess, because that'll mean I exclude other people. But I mean, there's a lot of really good artists on Art Blocks who are doing interesting things. There was an artist. The only generative artist who I knew like 10 years ago was this guy called Jared Bell, who I think went on to be a co-founder of Etsy. But his work is still like inspirational to me. I really enjoy his work. I recommend anybody checking him out, Jared Bell. I think he had a site called levitate.net. I don't even know if it's still up, but I don't know if he's going to make a reappearance in the scene, but I guess he's busy with other things. But to be honest, I mean, I guess my bigger inspirations is not like 20th century dead artists. I really like art history. I really like things like Rembrandt, Michelangelo, and Cézanne. That I still look to those
as well.
Yeah, I still look to those kind of masters for inspiration. I'm not looking for anything in particular, but just like looking at the work and letting it sink in, you just get this sense of what real quality is, So it just kind of like, and it gives a kind of context to the whole space we're in, because we could, often a lot of people who are into generative art, they're not necessarily from an art background. They don't see it in a context. And I think increasingly we're going to have to try and flesh that context out. And for the traditional art world, more than anything, so they can see what we're doing and think, oh, actually, what you're doing is art. And, so we can really sort of like.
So what you are saying right now, it's like right now the collector of Gen Art are not very well educated on the art history?
I mean, some of them are. Some of them do. Like typically, I think a lot of people are coming from tech. They're coming from Wall Street. They weren't necessarily interested in traditional in any art. Maybe 5-10 years ago, a lot of people from the gaming world, from gambling. They're not areas that typically are kind of really focused on art. But no, I think they generally are. They do have a deep kind of love for the art. Maybe it started with a kind of like an attitude of, oh, this is an investment. But the more time they spend with it, the more I definitely see like this emerging sensitivity to aesthetics in the buyers community. They really do have. They're starting to get a really good eye, and you can tell because of the way they talk about it, the way they pair work, they curate. They curate their own collections and stuff. So, but how far they're looking back, I don't know. Typically, I don't think they're looking beyond the NFT world. But increasingly, there will be an appetite to learn more about art history and understand what's come before. And that's something I want to explore more and write about, because I do have a foot in that world. I still have a love for that world, and it's not. From what I've seen, there's not a lot of people who they're usually in one camp or another. There's not many people who bridge that, have a genuine love for both. And because there's a cultural barrier there, the culture is so different. But increasingly more and more people will,
Okay. And so if I get it right, you view yourself as a bridge between the two worlds as well.
I would like to make a contribution, let's say, to that conversation.
Okay.
and try to, articulate what we do in gen art to the traditional art world. But again, it needs lots of people to make lots of small contributions for it to, yeah.
Okay. And okay, perfect. So I have a segment on my show called Past Decisive. So it's like when I'm asking to my current guest, which other guest my current guest want to see on a Robert Spotlight, and which question would you like to me ask to the next guest?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have it would have to be another Art Blocks artist. Have you had other Art Blocks artists on here?
Who?
Have you had artists from Art Blocks on here before?
No, but I'm not sure to get the name right.
Oh, so there are people. I know a lot of the Art Blocks artists. Any one of them, I would suggest I can put you in touch with them.
Okay.
Maybe. Just because I've done this podcast and some of the other artists will see it, they may get in contact, right? But what question would I ask them? Maybe what do you find really difficult about the process of making art? That might be an interesting question. What are the biggest challenges, emotionally, mentally, technically? That might be a good one to ask. That could open a can of worms.
Perfect. I took that question. And last question for me, it's for you, Harvey. What is an NFT?
What is an NFT?
Yes.
Well, obviously your audience knows what that they have their own ideas for what it means to me. Do you want a technical answer or just a
No, I just want your answer.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just sort of give you a more emotional answer because everybody knows technically what they are. But it's kind of a way for me as an artist to, create digital art that can be, that people can own and trade and create a market. So it's a way that I can make a digital output and people can actually have a sense of ownership and treat it kind of like a financial asset if they want. But it's that connection between making digital art and a market and an audience. So that's what it provides for me.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Harvey, for your time. Thank you for the audience. Thank you, Janelle Forbes. Thank you, Michael Lemay, and for all the other live watcher. That was a wonderful conversation with Harvey. We talked about Fontana, we talked about Velum, and we also talked a little bit about meditation. It was a wonderful conversation. And Harvey, thank you again to be.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much. Bye.